So a lot of people, as we've been curating this, said, why are you doing a panel on collaborative, urban, or other kind of space in the middle of an art fair, right? So I mean, for us, it's very important to think of the art fair as a public space, as a space where discourse is created. So think of this panel as a linkage between the art fair, or the art fair moving outwards into this wide field of knowledge. But also think of it as a space, using a term I used earlier, of cross-pollination.
I'm going to take you through 3 iterations of Jaaga. We've actually iterated a lot and moved and flowed in every nook and cranny. But broadly speaking, 3 ways that we've moved. In 2009, Freeman and I thought we should start a space that brought together our individual communities. Freeman from the tech world, me from the art world. What happens if we run a space that brought these 2 wonderful groups of people together? And we started with an empty piece of land, used this pallet rack material, which is basically shelving material, invited the community at large to help us design it. So we did cardboard mock-ups at that location, and then constructed something fairly large. This is about 20 meters wide, 8.5 meters high, multi-level, and then started to invite various types of artists and creators and techies to kind of take over it. We imagined this to be a very experimental, temporary project. We thought maybe 3 to 6 months. About a couple of 100 events in, we realized that we weren't going to get away with shutting it down, and we would have to think of how it grew and what we would do with it. And this is about 18 months into the project. And some of the key learnings is that doing something with the community that actually would use the space is critical to a sense of ownership. But we also realized that just given the diverse kinds of events that were happening there, that they might need some kind of more dedicated space, kind of something more designed for its use. So in June 2011, we decided to break down the building and kind of grow it much larger, right? So we took over a huge trash dump in the middle of Bangalore. This is like a plot that was 3 times larger than our first version. So we had an auditorium, we had a cafe, we had workshopping spaces, screening rooms, co-working areas, event spaces of different types, indoor and outdoor. So hundreds of events later, we realized one very key thing. From this kind of vibrant, dynamic scenario, a smaller group of people kind of repeatedly were coming back with very interesting ideas that might change the way a business is run or artwork is executed. And we were curious to see how we could support that smaller group. To support them, more than just the space, we needed something to do with programming. In 2014 and January, we took it apart. We said, okay, what does Jaaga support? It supports artists and creatives on one side. It supports entrepreneurs, technology entrepreneurs on one side. And it wants to help people learn and keep learning through their life. So we did something rather shocking to a lot of our larger community. We shut our doors. We decided to become very curatorial. So with Jaaga Study, we set up a couple of acres farmland in Bangalore, edges of Bangalore, organic farm, where residents would come in every quarter, about 10 to 15, sometimes 20 residents at a time, that we carefully selected over a few leaps and bounds of applications and things like that. And they lived in this nature surrounding this beautiful pallet rack building. They did yoga in the morning. They learned to code with online courseware, no teachers on campus, and then apply those skills to service NGOs. So they were actually kind of applying what they learned over a period of time. And you'll see that this is how it looks. We build this structure every year. We break it down. There's kinds of different types of outreach that we do with our local communities that work around that space. Jaaga Startup is right in the central business district. It's 7,000 square feet of sparkly white penthouse space. And we support here people who have the ideas but also have some skills to build out their ideas. They might have tech skills, they might have management skills, they might have business skills, and they're looking for the next level. So they're looking to build out their team or go deeper with their product or engage with the investor community. So then we curate a small group of these guys, look primarily towards interesting founders, see that their skills either match or fill in gaps for our community, and developed a very deep network that is useful to each other. So it's peer mentorship. We provide curated events and collaborative spaces for them to share their learnings and grow together. And I'm really proud to say in 18 months, we've not had a single failed startup. Some of our alumni startups have now secured very good funding as well. So that's Jaaga Startup. And then we have Jaaga DNA, and DNA stands for Design, Networks, and Arts. This is very close to my heart, and we're looking at how we can connect creatives and artists to do something in public space, always responding to issues either social or environmental, but with public, with government. So we liaison between these groups. And we follow a three-pronged process. It's steeped in research, ethnographic. We try to understand the spaces that we try to take over. These are always public spaces. Understand the communities through ethnographic or design research processes. Then we invite or curate artists and kind of help them take a more nuanced or sensitive approach in their execution of their artwork or in their ideation of the artwork, involving the communities each time so that they start to feel like they themselves have created the artworks, they themselves own these spaces, and try to kind of work on those models. And then finally, we look at our projects constantly, whether they're paintings or sculptures or performative pieces in these public spaces. We're constantly documenting, we're constantly trying to record, go back, understand, monitor what worked for the community, how has it taken to it, what impacted the people. For example, this one was the most recent one, actually not the most recent one, this was done in December, and it involves finally coming together of technology and art in public space. It's a phone booth. People can access stories of a neighborhood from this phone booth. So this is what we are trying to do in our 3 tracks. It's exciting for me personally because I kind of split my 20 hours a day between these programs. 20 hours a week, sorry. I wish I had 20 hours a day. And I think I'll leave you with these 4 points. Essentially, that involving communities that will become stakeholders in your spaces is very critical from ideation and creation process itself. So from the very beginning, do it with others. Experimental pilots have worked wonderfully for us. Every time we iterate, we can move lightly, but we always monitor and assess and try to understand through a series of metrics what we can derive from it. And so our programs are very user-driven, therefore. It's always driven by what people want. Us shrinking our direct interactions with the public from our first couple of versions, which was wide open, very broad, to now very curatorial, has actually been very successful. I went in very nervous because I'm kind of like, I want to be open, everything is cool. But I think that we're able to impact far more people by concentrating our efforts towards creating these wonderful thought leaders or entrepreneurs or artists and really working closely with them. So there's a ripple effect. And finally, the one thing that all of Jaaga has always been trying to do is invest in our creative economy in the city, in the country, because I have a child. It's important that we are able to take this world and give it to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Archana.
I'm going to tell you a quick little story about Makers Asylum and what I've been up to for the past 2 years. So I used to work for this company called iNetra. It was a mobile eye diagnostic company based out of MIT Media Labs in Boston. We were building mobile eye diagnostic devices to give you an eye test using a smartphone. It was a simple handheld device that you would hook on your smartphone to, and with a couple clicks of a button, it would pop out your prescription. And then you can go and get your eyeglasses from anywhere. I was primarily working on the hardware of this device. And to do most of the prototyping, we used to use this makerspace over there called Artisans Asylum. It was this huge makerspace, about the size of 2 football fields. We used to use scooties to ride within it. And over there, we had all sorts of labs and spaces. But the most interesting part of this space was the people that it got around and how much collaboration went about it and the kind of tools that they had. I started traveling around various parts of rural India, continuing to take eye tests, and at the same time developing the hardware further. But the biggest problem with me was that every time I had to come up with a new iteration of a device or come up with a new improvement, I had to go through various service providers to continue to create a new device. So it would take a very long time, and at the same time, there was no learning involved. Eventually, I found this tiny little chawl in Marol that used to allow me to use their equipment. So I had a lathe machine finally and a milling machine to continue to quickly churn out some prototypes. So I was super happy over here. I was spending about 4 months of my time just inside this chawl. Fell into the gutter a couple of times, but super awesome fun. And one fine day, the best thing happened. The ceiling of Ainetra's office fell down. And it broke everything. It broke our furniture, it broke our equipment, it broke our tables, it broke pretty much everything. So I picked up the phone and I called up the landlord and I was like, hey, can you fix this? Can you fix the room and can you fix the tables? He said that he can fix the room, but he's not going to buy us new tables. So I said, fair enough, I'm going to build it myself. And then I reached out to Facebook and Twitter and all these other places to look for people, again, like we all over here, to find a little community of people to get together and build some tables with me. And that Sunday, about 6 random people showed up to help me build some tables out of nowhere. But the best part was they kept coming back. They kept coming back every Sunday to build something or the other. And we built all sorts of fun projects from like water bottle bazookas to like an LED cube and artistic installations. Only fun stuff was happening that time. In a couple of months, the back room, that 50 square foot little space, there was so much equipment and so much projects that we couldn't really move inside that space. So we thought that we should get our own little space. So we went searching, and one of my friends had this tiny little old garage lying in Bandra, and we thought this would be perfect. So we immediately got that. In a couple of weeks, it started looking like this. By this time, I decided that I'm going to quit my fancy US paying job and continue working on building this community. So we started doing a lot of workshops, a lot of trainings, and collaborating with various artists and engineers and developing interesting hardware. Because India has a very good, so I personally feel that hardware should be developed in India. I've worked on various parts of the world, but at the same time, I feel like when it comes to hardware and doing research and development, we should be doing a lot of interesting things over here. So anyways, we set up this garage. And soon, in a couple of months, there was this college called India School of Design and Innovation that came up recently in Mumbai. They reached out to us and they told us that, hey, you're doing some awesome stuff. We're setting up a new design school. Why don't we guys work together? We'll give you some space and you set up something over here. So we set up this space in the back room of their area. We started getting more and more equipment. We started sharing their equipment. The interesting thing that started happening over there was that a lot of designers started collaborating with engineers from outside the school, and a lot of those designers started collaborating with more artists, creating very interesting products in a very short amount of time. So I was pretty excited by all of this, and I thought that, you know what, I'm going to take some vacation now. I'm done. So I moved back to Delhi for some time. And around then, I ended up setting a Makers Asylum in Delhi instead of taking a vacation. This is very close to Saket. And on the front face of it, it says, pass it on, which is more of our philosophy now. It talks about pass on the knowledge, pass on the creativity. So a couple of girls ended up painting this. It looks super cool. Anyways, in a short period of time, we ended up creating a beautiful community around this space as well. Out of all across Delhi, we started getting artists and interesting engineers coming together and prototyping and creating all sorts of installations, amputated limbs for people that needed it, air diagnostic devices, and all sorts of fun projects also were going on all the time. That once people have the access to that equipment, they start exploring in a very interesting way, and that's what we started seeing. When I went back to Mumbai, I saw this. The entire space at ISDI was converted into a crazy madhouse. There were so many people, and there was so much happening that we had no place to move. People had started taking up back rooms of ISDI, which we weren't actually supposed to use. We started using unconstructed parts of the building that were technically illegal. So ISDI told us that, hey guys, you guys have to calm down. We can't deal with you anymore. Either you slow down or you get out of here in 1 month. So there was no slowing down for us. So we said, okay, fine, fair enough. We're going to leave. We tried very hard to get some funding. We did a lot of, we reached out to everyone we could. We then finally raised an Indiegogo campaign as well. So we got like 7 lakh rupees. We were super excited. We ended up getting a space in Andheri after that, our own space. And the best part about this space, the entire community of Mumbai, everyone that had been using the space came down to build it. When I mean build it, they actually did everything from plastering the walls to like setting up the lights and everything and making all the furniture over there. Everything was done by the entire community. We didn't spend any money building the space. And within a month, the space looked like this. And it's super happening. So come check it out. Thank you. But something interesting that I realized over the time, when we started, we were trying to build this community of like-minded people and people who would like to come and explore. And over time, we realized that the good ideas and the good projects come from when unlike-minded and people get together and when people get outside of their comfort zone. And for example, the C3PO project, you will remember this. That's an interesting project because on the outside, it's all origami, but on the inside, it's all robotics. So origami artist, an engineer, a mechanical engineer, a sculptor, and a spray painter got together to build this thing. And they built it, and they showcased it at Godrej, so that was also fun. Thanks, Parmesh. Another really cool thing that happened recently is this girl was an artist. She used to make like a lot of crafts things and make notebooks and all sorts of fun toys. And she started using the laser cutter, and she made her own brand called the Black Canvas because it allowed her to suddenly start making her work much more repeatable. And because using a laser cutter, that helps. So she started making her own brand, and now she's out there and she's doing some amazing stuff. Another cool thing that's going on right now at the Asylum in Mumbai is there's this doctor. He's working on mobile eye diagnostic devices again, mainly for retinal imaging. So he had this problem at his clinic, and instead of just talking about it, he came down to the Asylum and started figuring out ways to make it. And within a short period of time, he's not only made it, but he's actually building a startup around it and taking it further, which is quite exciting how consumers are becoming product designers and learning and building and solving their own problems. So that's what pretty much the Asylum is about. It's been a great 2 years. Look forward to a lot more. So thank you.
Thank you, Vaibhav.
I mean, Unbox is about 5 years old now. We started in 2011. This is sort of the largest format of the festival, which is a 3-day festival. We have about 300 to 400 people who participate. And you know, most of, I mean, in terms of the way that we've set up the festival, the way we conceptualized it, I'll talk about it in the slides, but what you'll see is that it's a lot about celebrating the process, actually being, you know, kind of moving away from this idea of a keynote or a plenary where there's a finished kind of outcome that's shared with people that doesn't necessarily give you a window into the process. I think we've really been exploring Unboxed as an interstitial space, and what that really means for us, so just kind of backtracking a bit, I run a design thinking firm in Delhi and Bangalore called Quicksand, which we started in 2005. And in the conception of Quicksand, which actually came about as a partnership between someone like me who has a business and technology background, a partner of mine who's actually in the audience, Avinash, who's a video artist and toy designer, and a third partner who's a filmmaker, a product designer who's a fourth partner, and a fifth partner who's a journalist and a media major. I think the idea that you could come from such sort of diverse backgrounds and basically start a consulting practice that looks to create more meaningful solutions. It doesn't matter what the context is. We work in international development, we work in business innovation, we work in the cultural industry. But the idea that there are these different perspectives that can come together and actually create more meaning than what individual disciplines might have the capacity to was the founding idea of Quicksand. And about 5 or 6 years into that practice, we realized that we'd done significant work. I think we were proud of what we were able to do over the last 5-6 years. But we had this growing sense of kind of disquiet about not having a community around us that thought about the same way. Just being able to make kind of a larger network of practitioners, like-minded folks. And that's what led to the idea of Unbox in 2011. So it really started as kind of moving outside of our consulting practice, trying to create a platform that can be a lot more open, that could accommodate our multiple interests around art, design, technology, science, governance, you name it. I mean, essentially, we're a bunch of curious people at Quicksand, and so we wanted to grow that sort of ecosystem. And so Unbox became a project in that space. And it started off as a festival, like I said, a 3-day festival. And about 5 years into it, having run about 4 editions of the festival, what we've realized looking back is that we managed to create a space that is actually in between sort of somewhat rigid definitions of discipline. So it's not a design festival, it's not an art festival, it's certainly not a social innovation festival, but it's somewhere in between. And I think that interstitiality of the space is what is really exciting for us, right? Because I think there are a few things that really allow you, when you're working in between spaces. One, I think the ideas are a lot more fuzzy. They're open to be challenged. You can break them apart. You can rebuild them. That's what a space in between allows you. A space that has a very strong identity that's rooted in, say, a particular discipline like design, and there are multiple design festivals cropping around, I think also tends to be a little exclusionary. It does exclude a body of practitioners that may not relate to the methods of that practice. So it tends to have a very strong identity, and we've therefore been deliberate in keeping this. I mean, it's also our biggest challenge of how do we position this? What does Unbox mean? Is it a design festival you're coming to? Most certainly not. And I think and this in-between space is also extremely high in potential in terms of what, like you said, the potentiality of in-between spaces, what it can generate, what can come out of it. So I think we've really been exploring Unbox as an interstitial space, and this is sort of an idea that's been brewing in my head. So thank you, Art Fair, for allowing me to put it out to the public. The other bit that we've done constantly year on year is just change the format of the platform. So, the success of Unbox for us is how diverse is the audience that we've been able to accommodate, right? How diverse is the community that makes up Unbox? So every year it happened at a 3-day festival. There are multiple sub-festivals that also go on. This is called the Food Lab. Every year, Food Lab takes on a different avatar. We try and sort of work in sustainable food and local consumption and production, try to bring that into the festival. We've also changed, kind of, just moved Unbox to different cities across the world. We've created an art installation at MozFest, which is this big festival supported by Mozilla Foundation that celebrates the open web. Unbox was there. Unbox was at National Institute of Design, where we actually ran a 2-week incubator where we took the theme of future cities, just thinking about the future of our cities, but bringing in about 35 to 40 urban thinkers, architects, designers, researchers, academics to think about, what would be a people-centered future of the city, right, outside of sort of the growing discourse around the smart cities or like a technocentric view of it. So this constant experimentation with format, primarily as a way of reaching out to more communities across, not just the country, but across the world. The third, I think, important kind of pillar for Unbox is celebrating process and not an outcome. And I think this comes partly out of our own consulting practice as well, where the sort of Kool-Aid around innovation rarely, if ever, talks about the process. And you realize that it's such a long, drawn-out process of discussion, refinements, breaking things down, which people don't, it's not the 5-minute fix that you get out of, say, a TED Talk, right? That gives you this very trimmed sort of vision of what got created. But just stepping back and going into the process and what did it take the series of ideas, the series of kind of serendipitous conversations that led to an idea to come to life. I think that's what we try and celebrate at Unbox. So really just to focus on process time and again. And therefore you'll see that, much less of keynotes and plenaries, more of conversations in the workshop where people are sitting across, pretty much like the Makers Asylum, Jaaga. And I think that's the sort of unifying thread between kind of all three and the Culture Lab, is this emphasis on process. And then finally, again, another proposition, something that we've been talking about in this studio, is this move from multidisciplinary to what is called transdisciplinary, right? And so the subtle difference between the two is that multidisciplinary kind of acknowledges that there are different disciplines and each discipline comes with a method. So it acknowledges that it's a collection of disciplines, but the challenge remains, how do you bridge or how do you find a meeting point between these different methods? Whereas transdisciplinary is kind of a framework or a way of thinking where you are transcending the boundaries of discipline. So really what you kind of leave behind the methods and the practices, but you begin to work inside out, ground up from what is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And then it's left to the practitioners to figure out what is the skill or what's a valuable skill that you bring to it. So I think that transition from multidisciplinary to transdisciplinary has happened for us both at Quicksand as our sort of studio that supports Unbox, and at Unbox itself, right? Where what started as kind of this loose constellation of people from various communities and various disciplines to now sort of this, where people are still the biggest asset for Unbox, but you really draw them in on a conversation around what is it that we are trying to solve for, or what is it that we're trying to change.
My name is John Thakura. I've been coming to Unbox from the beginning, and so I consider myself to be a friend of the family. It's a place where people who are not like-minded, they're very unlike-minded here, but you actually meet people who have complementary skills and complementary networks. But I don't come here with an agenda called doing business. I come here to meet people and to refresh and to feel confident again.
It's really about creating this meeting point for different disciplines. So that as an artist and as being also in a curating position, it's so interesting to see how people deal with that.
I think people are tired of being shown stories of success or things that are finished and polished. You rarely, if ever, get an insight into what went behind it. That it's never really someone talking down from a stage to an audience, but it's always someone sitting across a bench and sharing stories and building and co-creating things.
So it's interesting from a space point of view, just trying to put together something that lasts for 3 days. And so one of the things that we've used this year are the pallets. And we've sourced these at industrial area from a guy who uses them for packaging. And it's so modular, it's like a building block of some kind, so we can just keep reusing it around the space, doing different things. I think it kind of imbibes the spirit of Unbox, that we don't have finished things. Some things start here and some things kind of continue from here and probably will show up the next time around or something.
So we have to really feed 300 people, create a really interesting experience, and making people more conscious about where their food is coming from, what they're consuming, the stories around the makers as well as the people who are serving it.
Also just like bringing some novelty into what you're eating.
But also because we have this amazing network of people just around us, and it's an alternate income for them, and it's interesting to have a design festival that supports smaller producers also.
Yeah.
While most of the festival happens at the venue, we've tried to bring in little things which can take people to experience very specific aspects of the city. And it's rarely about just that experience, but being able to engage in a context and hopefully then take something back to the context that they're coming from.
what you get out of it is also something you maybe discover a few months later, or you meet so many interesting people, things evolve or things will come into existence.
All of you are about making with your hand, so that tactile thing, as well as about using cutting-edge technology. I'm just wondering if any of you wants to reflect on this and tell us a little bit about the kind of knowledge that is coming out of your own spaces and the future of that knowledge.
I guess in some sense we're like we've always been very curious about the culture of what we're trying to do, right? And in a sense, what comes out of it? Now we're 6, almost 7 years in, and what I've seen happen is, in the beginning it was kind of like this crazy energy, just like my 2-year-old has, it's like, do this, let's build this big building, da 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 da. And the kind of energy and excitement it brings kind of opens up endless possibilities in terms of ideas or solutions or approaches or processes. But over the 6 years, I see, like, as we have grown individually as people in time, and as Jaaga has grown, our community has also changed. And so how they modify that initial kind of rough, gritty, exciting stuff into something more polished, more kind of nuanced, more, not interesting, but more kind of like a diamond in the rough to like the sparkles you wear, right? It's really that. And when it comes to that sparkly area, that's when I think something that's seeded in art and creative energy can become something that explodes into impact, which our investor friends will tell you is critical, right? To be able to assess it and fund it. So you get to a point where it can scale out large. And this is, honestly, this has been there all along in universities. It just gets bogged down by the bureaucracy or the machinery that things tend to become. So I think the play is always between staying light and gritty and fun, but being able to kind of slowly filter out and hone certain things, right? Maybe.
Yeah. Vaibhav, Ayush, you want to talk about these tensions?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to your point about non-formal ways of learning or non-institutional sort of formats of learning, I think there is no debate about the fact that that's the way for the future, right? I don't know if, sorry, it might be very provocative, but if there's any formal learning in institutions at all, given the sort of access that that people have now, whether it's trends in self-publishing or trends in, this whole trend in the development sector around toolkits, for example, right? Everything being distilled down into some packaged form of information and knowledge that can be shared and disseminated. So I feel that in some sense for us, Unbox is a response to that, which is to create a non-formal, because we feel that people are seeking out those experiences. Other than that, I think there's a lot of attention that we put into the environment that you create, right? And the influence that has on the knowledge exchange and in the manner in which people actually tend to retain and dwell on that knowledge. And I think it's because of the environment and an exchange that you're able to create and a certain creative energy that space has that tends to stay with people, and people tend to, and I think they internalize that knowledge a lot better because how work and play kind of fuses together.
So if everyone is learning at these places, then what is the role of, say, universities which give you pieces of paper in this? No, but maybe you can reflect. If people are coming to make things, why would someone aspire to go to an MIT or an IIT or whatever if they can just come hang out with friends and make things together?
Well, of course, there are two ways to go about everything. The Asylum is a lot about self-exploration and learning by yourself. There's not a lot of hand-holding to it. So I feel like that's a great way to learn. personally, based on my experiences. I was never good in school. So that makes sense to me to figure out, work on project-based learning. So that's actually something that we're experimenting with the Asylum as well. We're creating programs which are more project-based. There's a lot of self-learning involved in it, but at the same time, you're working towards a common goal and trying to create something which has some sense of purpose, and at the same time, there is sensibility of passion to it. So, but educational institutes were made for various reasons, but over and over, as much as I've been learning about them, they're a great way to get us trained to get into a job. That's what they're meant to do, right? So, and they do it great. They do it in a very beautiful way of training you about how to follow the regular ways of life.
I mean,
if you want to explore,
maybe you don't want this discussion to become about institutionalized learning, but actually, radical as it may be, institutionalized learning today, if we take the state of that system in India, is feeding exactly that engine, which is the engine of vocation and industry, and it's essentially feeding that. But it is, I think it merits a rethink, right? Because these alternative spaces are engaging people in more meaningful ways.
I mean, some of the Ivy League, some of the premier institutions worldwide, you look at a Stanford or an MIT, they're definitely creating content, coursework, all of this that enables people to towards self-driven, self-motivated learning, right? That's what MOOCs are about. That's what we're doing at Jaaga study as well, is you define what you want to learn, you set out your goals, you learn it, and if you don't, it's okay. We're not going to hang you for it. There's no beautiful little medal you get at the end. I mean, we have a great party at the end, but but really, and I think, yeah. So
sure. So I mean, the MIT president was in Bombay last week, and he was telling us about how they've begun to use their courses as a filter. Yeah. They experimented with one course that, say, 50,000 people took. 500 people got through, and they invited, say, the top 50 people to MIT and maybe admitted some. So perhaps that's one way. But you spoke about environments, and I'm just wondering how you reflect on, and this is linked to institutionalized learning, but also larger. A lot of what you all do is experimental, niche. But over the past year in our country, we've seen a lot of these large-scale efforts, which in a sense are an amplification of everything that you've been talking about, whether it's Make in India, whether it's Startup India, even if it's something like Skill India. I mean, there's a lot of these efforts. I'm just wondering if you could again reflect on these. Do you see these efforts as a validation of things that you've been talking all the time? Do you see them as a way to institutionalize some of the stuff, which in your case you think might not work? Just tell us about what you feel about this atmosphere which is being created, and to me a lot of what you said about is also, it comes from that same discourse as well. So I'm just wondering if you can reflect on that. Either of y'all or all of y'all.
I mean, so personally I feel that alternative should remain alternative and niche should remain niche. I feel that it's in the sense that, these kind of large programs around kind of Make in India, or let's say, the Smart Cities project that's responding to kind of urbanization in a certain way. I think they're still, they're responding in the way that the institution, the system knows how to respond, right? Which is that you create kind of large-scale intent and you kind of rally the resources around it. But the important point is that are you within the paradigm of those large institutionalized kind of push that's happening, creating a space for the alternative? Because that has a way of, I think it's a check and balance, right? And that's what the alternative provides. I think it provides a counter voice that's needed. I don't think it's required for for an Unbox or a Jaaga to become a multi-city kind of festival, or 30,000 people sort of walking in. It doesn't need that. So I feel that there is what's missing is possibly how do you synergize between these large programs and the alternative spaces that exist that require actually a bit of support and to thrive and to exist, to coexist. So I feel that is still by and large missing in my perspective, right? What is?
Sure. Yeah, Vaibhav, you wanted to add to that?
Yes,
yeah.
I completely agree with you about niche being niche and alternative being alternative. That's totally the right way to go about things. But at the same time, Just wanted to add something over there, that it's leading a lot more people towards awareness, to believing that niche also exists. So it's exposing a lot more people to that niche so that actually they can step up and get the guts to experiment with something. Because until now, not a lot of people have been experimenting. So it's sort of exciting in both ways, that is sort of bringing about that awareness in people, which is good. And those kind of things only happen in the large scale. But at the same time, the niche. When it's a niche, it's always more fun.
I think the more interesting thing here for me is actually how does the alternative talk to the powers that be? And that is really where I'd like to see the fun happen. Like, where do we as the fringe, right? We've always represented fringe. I'm very interested and ambitious to kind of see that in our country, to see this fringe be able to hold its own and talk to policy.
But there's an alternative talk to each other, which is something I've wanted to ask all of you.
The alternative is too busy keeping its head above water.
Because all of you are doing incredible work in different cities. I'm just wondering, do you all connect with each other? Do you all strategize together?
I think it's actually forums like this that bring us together. Thanks, Parmesh and the India Art Fair, is that because we get to meet each other at these spaces, we're quickly able to transact, collaborate, seed some ideas, look at it. I mean, a lot of these forums enable us to do that. Honestly, just given family life and just Jaaga itself, there's very little time. I think collaboration is complicated. It's hard. It's very real work. It sounds great. I want to be collaborative. We're cool. We're collaborative. It's where Jaaga started. Open, collaborative, wonderful. But it takes a lot of energy, a lot of thinking, a lot of constantly talking to people, constantly keeping your ear close to the ground, but also trying to make sense of a larger picture. So I feel that these moments where we are actually pulled out of our context, I take a 6-hour commute to get to here, helps me introspect and enables me to talk to people. So yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Pretty much same. Definitely these forums allow a lot of collaboration to happen, but at the same time, what we do is, I guess, we blog a lot. So we make sure that whatever we do, we make sure, at least from our learnings, we start putting it out. So more people who are trying to do something that we've done can at least learn from that and feed back into it.
I think the conversation with sort of powers to be or mainstream, at least for a lot of us, is opportunistic as well, right? And so, to your question of whether there's a directed, systematic way in which we'd collaborate to actually influence, say, policy, public policy, or things like that, it doesn't really happen. There are a few forums that exist, but for most part, to my knowledge, I mean, in the design fraternity, those are defunct forums. They are quite, design community is quite fragmented and sort of insular in their own rights. So I think the conversations that happen are opportunistic. I mean, for example, we were just talking outside, and Jaaga may become a partner, and we for Unbox in 2016 December. And those are things, and all of us are sort of a degree or 2 degrees removed. So there is certainly I think there's awareness, there is a voice for the alternative, and there are forums where ideas can be exchanged. That, I think, is a definite positive trend right now, and that we have sort of plugged into and dipped in and out of.
Sure. I think in my limited scope of understanding this universe, being a chameleon is useful, so you have to be able to change the language of war. So if we're talking to the powers that be, how do we bring them to our table, the one we handmade? So really that's one approach. The other is to kind of infiltrate, get in there, get into those spaces, kind of wear the sari or the suit that you need to wear, and it's kind of it comes easily, especially to creatives, that we can play roles, that we can kind of easily slink in and become a politician or become a demure woman in the midst of a male-dominated room. I feel like those are the ways we can, it's guerrilla warfare. Yeah, it's like it's what it is. Thank you.
The knowledge that you all create in your spaces is very valid. But how do you express that validity in public? I'm just thinking if something comes out of a university, there's a system for, applying for a patent, or there's a system for taking an idea from a lab to a commercial ramification, to a venture capitalist, to a company, and in each of these processes, many things fail, many things don't. But there are these big ecosystems that say formal knowledge networks have built over the years.
Yeah.
How do you validate the knowledge that comes out of your experimental spaces, and how do you then push that knowledge into the world so that it matters?
We have Jaaga Study, Jaaga Startup. It's really trying to do that. It tries to keep a kind of an alternative, open, crazy energy space in Jaaga Study where people learn, cross-pollinate, change, grow, whatever. It's crazy energy. But at Jaaga Startup, we very deliberately chose that type of location, that kind of like people wear collars. We encourage people to dress their part, to come in, to not be tardy, to be more structured. We provide white walls and sparkly lights and all of that, so that when our investor buddies walk in, they think they're walking into a space they're comfortable in. No way. In the end, we are playing our little game on them, but we're getting them comfy. We're saying we can talk your language the way you want it. We can pick it up.
At least until this video gets out.
I know. Damn it. I should have kept quiet.
But your investors probably don't have the time to see long YouTube videos. Vaibhav, what do you do?
As of now, it's been very organic. It's been over a barbecue on the ceiling of the Asylum. And we've had investors coming in. We've had consulate generals of French and US embassy walking in and relaxing with us. And at the same time, having a good conversation with everyone in a very neutral environment. We've had managing directors of companies walking in. But they've just been coming as a community member right now. But over time, now that we have a beautiful space, which is pretty much set, we plan to have more programs where we can do this in a more organized manner and make them feel a little special.
Serve them the tea.
Yeah, I mean, we've been terrible at it. We've just been terrible at it. I think just talking to Louis in the morning, we have 3 years of unedited video archive. If anyone in the room is up to edit that and create podcasts, there's tons of material there. We've tried a bit of publishing. We've self-published. And I think because it's so fluid between kind of Quicksand, Unbox, Blot, knowledge also tends to flow across these 3 practices. So we have published, for example, in the social innovation space, a toolkit that brings a body of work together and sort of puts it out. It's called DIY, Development Impact in You. We've also tried institutional sort of, where it's possible. For example, out of the incubator lab that we ran at NID, we were able to, interest a few funders to actually take on projects that they would support, over the course of a year for those projects to turn into something more, so longer and sort of sustainable. So we've tried those, but again, very opportunistic, very ad hoc. The short answer is that it's been a terrible effort, but it is something that, given what gets created and exchanged, I think it's almost a disservice that we're not able to capture that. And I think those are the challenges that non-formal systems really have to cope better with.
And maybe we can use that as an opening point to ask anyone in this room if they have solutions.
You spoke about how when you started, it was very free-flowing, like everybody is invited, to, let's say, 7 years down the line, when you have become much more curatorial. And don't you think that sort of defeats the purpose? Because everybody is trying to be curatorial and everybody is trying to be, represent something. And when you do that, it sort of kills the main idea of it being completely free format and being open to everyone. Then again, you are sort of doing the same thing, and 10 years down the line, the younger generation will say that they're very curatorial, this is how they thought, and now we... So it's sort of like the cycle that goes on and on. So how do you break away from something like that? And also, how do you keep it fresh, or how do you keep it in essence, the spirit of what Jaaga represents without it being curatorial is my question. I guess it's both to Ayush and Archana.
Asylum is too new, so you'll have fresh already.
I think for us, a couple of ways in which we responded to that. For example, to your point about how do you keep it fresh, I think we also realized that a festival year on year was much too soon, and we were not able to bring. For us, like I said, Unbox is rarely, if ever, about a showcase, right? It's about what gets created for or at Unbox is what is more important. So we have very consciously transitioned to once in 2 years. We've also broken up the format, and we said we do smaller events that can kind of go wider in terms of more cities. They can, in some sense, if you take the meta format of Unbox, that's a bit. You're right. It's even though our ambition is for it to be completely open, it does tend to be a bit exclusivist because it is self-selecting for people who understand interdisciplinary, who understand creative economy, and so there is a bit of that. But I think in moving to events that are, for example, now a media arts festival that we're doing in Bombay, which is just about media arts, that calls out to that community. But then there's also there was something that we did on design thinking in Bangalore. So we're just trying to break up the format so that we can reach out to more diverse communities, and each of those spaces has its own codes and rules, right? So the Meta Festival ran in a certain way, but we're very keen to see, give that a pause and say, if we want to reach out to more people, do we need to play by different codes and rules? And so we're trying that. We were a bit conscious of possibly that happening or beginning to happen.
You can't be everything to everyone. And I feel that the first few years of Jaaga, we had started to become that. It was very hard for people to even describe what Jaaga was to someone else, let alone for me to describe what Jaaga was to anyone. So there was, in 2014, a clear decision to understand ourselves first and then be understandable and useful to certain communities. And therefore this transition into curatorial. I've always been of the notion that I see examples in history for sure. We try not to repeat those examples, but it's important to understand it really. Like actually at Unbox, my presentation was Jaaga curates. I was actually making a strong stance that we do not curate, that the space, the framework of the structure and how we set it up invited a certain type of people, and those people invited others that added to the conversation. So I never had to say no to a particular event. We literally had hundreds a year. And so it kind of was community driven, right? With 2014 to now, we have definitely been curatorial, but I think it's important for me personally to explore that notion to really understand why I don't want to be curatorial or why I should make a stance against it. In doing so, I've realized the value of doing that because it really enables me to do something in this notion of longevity. It gives depth to my interactions with each of these people. You cannot physically be available to mentor 10,000 people a year, much as you would like to. Here, like, my time is much better spent, my team's time is much better spent there. The people that they work with is much better spent, I think. With DNA, we're able to open it up, much like what Ayush is saying. The projects within the program of DNA is very playful. So like in one group, a group of artists, like one artist is encouraged to curate the others. In another model, it's a virtual, it's a kind of an urban reality game where I curate the people, but they set the framework of how they want to work with each other. In the third, we invite a couple of artists and a couple of non-artists and push them together, kind of push them in the deep end of public art and say, go forth and create. Like, so I think in each of in each of our projects and residencies, we give ourselves that kind of freedom to move and change. But overall, I think we're better understood today.